Welcome, anglers, to the Fisherman's Favorite Podcast. I'm Charlie Peterson. I'm here with Sam Larsen and special guest Tom Huynh. We're going to try to get as many secrets out of Tom as we can today, and hopefully we learn something.
There's deer in the meadow, frogs in the pond, a place up the river where the fish are getting long. Bass in the lilies, crappie in the reeds, walleye on the rocks and pike in the weeds. There's a fella down the road who's a real fishing man, give you a stringer for the frying pan. Northland, fish and tackle, fisherman's favorite. It's a fisherman's favorite.
Super excited to have Tom on the Northland team. I remember, 3-4 years ago, some of our other pro staff members kept coming to us like, "Hey, there's this guy he's a bass fisherman, but he's winning all the walleye tournaments. You really got to look into him." And all of a sudden, the mystery of Tom Huynh kind of arose from that. And now here we are today. You're one of our members, and it's been awesome to work with you. So
it's awesome to work with you guys. I mean, just starting, when I did just a few years ago, and kind of just making a big splash all of a sudden, and then having, a company like you, believing in what I'm doing and doing something different, and willing to work with us and work with us that are changing things to make, baits and tackle for everybody doing what I'm doing.
So you give the listeners a little background to your start in it. You were a bass fisherman, right?
Yeah.
And how did you enter this world from there?
Well, from there, I worked, in my nail salons in Fargo for almost 20 years before making the jump into fishing, period. Like, I was in my mid-30s whenever I purchased my first boat, and that was the first boat I ever set foot in. And, I always, followed bass tournaments, and being from down south, being from Arkansas, that was the predator fish of choice. And so I always dreamt of fishing fishing bass tournaments and stuff like that. And I actually did try to get into a couple local derbies, but I never got called back from the tournament directors to jump in these. So I'm like, why not just do a Bassmaster Open then?
At first.
Yeah. So I did that. But what that did for me was diving in head first. I had to learn on the fly with all of fishing against some of the elites, a lot of the local sticks down there on their home bodies of water. Got my butt kicked many times. And, I was going into my third year of doing this, and that was going to be my last year if I couldn't make, ends meet doing it. And that was when COVID hit, and it shut down my salons at home for 7 weeks. And it was a little bit nervous time, and so for part of that shutdown, I had just bought these Garmin electronics. One of my bass fishing buddies, Tom, actually in New York, he's a pharmacist up there, but he a legal pharmacist. But he said you need to get this new Panoptics. You just need to get it. And me, I wasn't into electronics at all, and I was like, if I'm gonna do this, I just need to go ahead and learn them. So I spent the money, and with COVID, it started making me nervous. I'm like, crap, I just spent all this money. We still got rent in the salons to pay and everything like that. And so couldn't do anything but fish. So I just told myself, I'm going to put this transducer in the water, scan everything, look at everything, cast at every single thing I saw, whether it was moving or not, get a reaction, see what's happening down here. And I was literally bass fishing and along the shore, and I pan to the left, and I see a school of fish. I'm like, I wonder what that is. So I cast my Ned rig over there at the school, and it was a walleye about 13, 14 inches long. And I sat there and caught my first limit of walleyes ever, but they were tiny. But I was like, that's pretty cool. And so just watching and paying attention to everything on my electronics for, a couple weeks straight there. And then turning around and being like, you know what, I want to fish a tournament using this, a bass tournament. And somebody at the dock at Leech Lake, at the resort that I was staying at, said, I heard there's a professional bass tournament coming. And I kind of knew better because I followed the bass circuits. And like, they're not coming here. They are now. But, at that time, they weren't coming to Leech. And so I looked it up that night, and it was a walleye tournament. It was the AIM Weekend Walleye Series, and it was going to come that weekend. Mm-hmm. And my new next-door neighbor at the camper up there was Nate Wolski. And I had my bass boat. He had this little, I think it was a Lund, like a old, like more dents in it than it had gas probably. But we barely knew much at all about walleye fishing. But we were sitting there one night and we're like,
so time out a little bit. Did I hear it right that you caught your first limit of walleyes in 2020 during COVID?
Yeah. Anytime before, that wasn't the first time I ever fished for walleyes though. Before that, I would when we're bass fishing, you guys know we're standing up in front of the boat casting all day long. Yep. And then comes a point where like, especially those days when you're not catching anything, you're like, I just need to sit down, relax, and drag a bait around. And I would try what people would say to do to catch walleyes. I'd ask people, and they're like, you hear Lindy rig, drag a jig around, and I would catch one here or there, but never a limit. And that's when I kind of put it together. And Nate, I asked Nate, you want to fish a tournament with me? He said, what for? I'll never forget it. He's like, why? I'm like, for fun, I guess. And, the entry fee was like $400 and some bucks. We're like, let's just do this at one time. And so we took 3 days to figure out big walleyes. And we only caught 7 fish that tournament, but the top 5 went just shy of 40 pounds. And we won that one, and the rest was history. I mean, we started just piecing stuff together, paying attention to our electronics, and not, having the usual. My usual mindset was like, I'm just gonna do what I do, and it's hard to learn new things. Mm-hmm. But I just put my head down and started learning with forward-facing sonar, with Garmin LiveScope, how to read the fish, why they're in certain areas at certain times, and just it's more of a learning tool than a catching tool. Yeah. And that's where there's a lot of misconception with it. But for a lot of us tournament anglers, we're learning so much about fish that nobody knew before.
So how long was it from when you won that tournament until you looked up when the next tournament available that you could get into was?
We weren't going to do a second one.
No.
We just fished that. We won it. We're like, oh, this is freaking crazy. It's cool. Yeah. And then the tournament director, the next day, because of COVID, we didn't have in-person awards or anything. Mm-hmm. So the next day on the dock, that's when he presented us with our plaques and everything. And he said, I don't know what you guys are doing. I'm not going to ask you what you're doing, but I know it's something different. And he said, in the years that I've been tournament director in this industry, he goes, I know when something's being done differently. And he said, have you considered fishing the next one in the circuit, which was on Lake Winnie? And we were like, no. We're like, I asked him, I was like, where is that? I had no, it's only like, it's right down the road here, but I had no clue at the time. And so we entered that and finished 4th. Barely, I mean, it was so close, but we finished 4th place. We were super happy with that. And then that was it for AIM. We couldn't qualify for anything because we got in too late. Yep. And then beginning part of September or something, Nate calls me up late at night. He's like, "Hey, buddy," he calls me buddy all the time, but he's like, "Hey, buddy, I'm sitting here looking at this tournament schedule for next year, and there's still one more this year, and it was on the Masters Walleye circuit on Castle Lake in September." He goes, "You want to do it?" He said, and I said, "How much is it to get in?" And he's like, he said $1,000 entry fee, I believe around there. And I was like, "I don't know." And I said, but thought about it, and I was like, maybe we should see if we're actually onto something, because then looking up the Masters Walleye circuit, you see some bigger names, and it's like, okay, let's do this. Let's try to compete.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you the first one you win, do you think it was a fluke by any means, or did you guys know you're onto something? And then you get fourth in the second one. Like, where do you think you stand with these guys? Are you still completely up in the air, or do you think you guys have a good chance at coming into the Masters Walleye circuit?
After the first two tournaments, we still thought this is almost too good to be true.
Yeah,
like even for us, we were like, there's no way, because we weren't catching that many fish, and there was on Winnie, I think we were struggling to even get a limit, but they were the right ones, and so we were just as surprised as anybody, even not more, because like, what's going on here? And so we entered that, and 2-day tournament, weigh in on stage, and long story short, at the time we set the lake record for a tournament there and won that tournament. Now it's been broken since, but that first year in 2020 was, those 2 wins and a 4th place got me thinking, okay, next year I have to just go all in.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's pretty incredible, and I feel like, just the whole story. And I guess I knew you did some fishing growing up in Arkansas, but I didn't realize you really hadn't even been in a boat that much until. So your progression and learning is pretty amazing. I think that has to do, you're a student of the fish. You pay attention to everything out there. I've watched you fish. It's incredible how you can read their body language. But B, I feel like the resources out there with live scope and everything, you can learn so quickly now.
Thing is, I didn't use any YouTube, live scope, anything.
So you yourself taught all that, but you use this technology to kind of teach
myself.
Yourself.
Yes, and the key to it is like, and I say it a lot now, like there's a lot of people who are my age or even a little bit younger than me now that think it's too late to compete, too late to try to pursue this dream of competitive fishing, and it's not. I mean, it's almost a better time because you've lived some life, and you appreciate the amount of time, the amount of money, the sacrifice everybody at home has to make for you to be doing this, so you make the most out of it. And it's been something where I just told myself, like, I'm going to put my head down and grind, and, whatever I come up with, and all those people who are behind me, we're going to, ride this road together. But I just think that's a big difference, is getting that later start.
Yeah.
For me anyway.
Yeah. No, it's pretty incredible.
So now, do you like walleye fishing more than bass? Or it's kind of the same. It's kind of down the same path.
If I could get a walleye to eat a buzzbait, then I would, for sure.
That'd be the
say,
difference.
Yep. No, that
You sure you're not getting them to eat buzzbaits and we just don't know about it?
I'm gonna have to talk to you later. I absolutely love bass fishing, but where I've taken walleye fishing in the last couple of years, when I do have free time, I'm still out there trying to hone in on staying that step ahead. Because for a while, when Nate and I started doing this, and when I started doing it on my first year at NWT, I was basically it as far as standing in the front, doing what I do at all times.
Yep.
And now with the progression of the just the way things are being done now with fishing, the technology and all, like that trend is catching up to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like the electronics can get so advanced, but then once you get to that peak, people are going to catch up.
Yep.
So for me, I'm all about like educating people on what I'm looking at. Like next year is going to be a pretty big year for me as far as giving back, like showing people what I'm looking at. And, you know, because what that's going to do is actually push me to even get better, to dive even deeper to what I'm looking at and seeing.
Exactly. So
It's sometimes harder to explain it than like you see and you realize what's happening, and then when you have to explain to someone else, you're also realizing what you're actually seeing.
Yeah, a lot of most people probably are more visual.
Yeah.
Because me to try to explain what a walleye looks like when you've got 40 drum and 40 white bass surrounding it, I can do that, but you have to be able to see it.
And I think that, like, it just goes to show you saying you didn't really do the YouTube thing or that nothing is as valuable as time in the water. Mm-hmm. And I would say your resources go into, you know, media outlets, you know, listening to this podcast, you're gonna learn something.
Yep.
Time on the water, you're gonna learn more. And time on the water with someone that already knows what they're doing is like invaluable. So, you know, you coming out with that deal of kind of showing people what you're looking at and whatnot is where I think the best learning happens. Mm-hmm. So coming into year 2, you guys you're fishing this all the AIM circuits at that point?
Yeah, we fished AIM, Minnesota. Yeah.
So I know, you know, we heard it at the office here. There was a lot of rumors about what is Tom doing? He's doing something differently. And we can go into kind of, I think a little bit of your game plan further on, but did any of those rumors come back to you and be completely false?
All the time.
Well, like, what are some, like, the wildest ones of what people thought Tom was doing?
Well, the biggest thing is that they thought that I had something like 10 years futuristic from Garmin. You know, Garmin and I actually never had a relationship till this year.
Yeah, so you weren't even working with Garmin at the time, right?
Yeah. And
or were you a spy?
Yeah, maybe. It could be, you never know. But no, that and that just, well, one other thing. Oh, everybody just thought that for a while there that I was using blade baits for every single application, which I don't get. I've used them before, but the biggest thing when people ever saw me fishing, they'd be like, "What are you doing? Like, what in the world are you doing?" Because with this world of forward-facing sonar now, it's a lot of jigging wraps, puppet minnows, all that, all those kind of glide baits, reactionary baits, and I still have yet to throw one of those baits because in a tournament, like me, I'm doing this because I'm trying to fish tournaments. I'm trying to, you know, make my road doing that. But in a tournament, if you foul hook a fish, you're not supposed to count it.
Yep.
And so Nate and I this last year actually finesse fishing, foul hooked a giant, the biggest fish of the tournament, hands down. We foul hooked it, and it just made me so sick because I'm like, dude, we have to put her back.
Yeah. And
it was during our championship. I'm like, we put it back, but the way we're fishing, that's the only one we foul hooked.
Yeah.
Ever.
I say I've now that I've got to know you, know how you fish a little bit. I'm kind of surprised you did foul hook. And do you think it was maybe hooked and then popped out on the way up and recaught, or just a swipe and a miss?
I think it was a swipe.
Swipe and a miss.
Yeah, because when it reacted, when the bait went past it, it reacted. I'm like, oh, it's on, but that's what happened. And the reason and right away, I knew it was a walleye from the way that Mark looked.
Yep.
But when it hit, I was like, I changed my mind to Northern because it was like just going.
Yeah.
And then that's how it just spun on the bait, got hung up under the dorsal, and that's what happened. But people always wonder, like, I guess it's a mystery because when they go by in the past, I'm just standing there, not moving a muscle, holding my rod, and everybody else is, ripping baits.
Yep.
But that's just my style. That's where I'm confident, and I want to force that fish to eat, if that makes sense. I want him to put that bait in its mouth. And so, because I don't want that on my conscience either way. Like, I'm not going to keep a foul hook fish, period, ever. But I don't want to, if I do foul hook it, at the end of the day thinking, shoot, I should have thrown something different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You could have got it to eat.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So one of those things you do is the black jig. Tell us a little bit about the black jig, because we'll talk about it after, but the black jig has changed in the last 2 years when it comes to walleye fishing.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. And I think we owe you for that.
Well, to me, black, like when going the bass fishing too, just going back to that, my favorite baits were green pumpkin and black. And it just goes with everything that's in the lake that they forage on, especially walleyes. And there's a cool graphic that we did earlier this year where I show why, and I'll post that at some point this spring. But showing why black and green pumpkin are so popular. But for me, the color black, it can resemble anything, so especially the way we're fishing right now. The fish are going to see that when it's coming down towards them. So at that point, it doesn't matter if it's black, if it's pink, if it's white, it's a silhouette.
It's the musky guys always say the best three colors are black, black, and black, because all their baits are up high, silhouetting.
And then as it comes down, even if they can see it, they're not going to get spooked from it. It's just a shadow. Yep. And especially if you have a bait on the back, and again, my baits are very natural looking. And honestly, I would rather, not the jig. I could care less if the fish sees a jig. So black to me is the most camouflage, the most the most natural color right now. I know there's some coming in the spring that I can't wait to see, because we had some ideas to make that a little bit more subtle. And but yeah, all those natural colors for sure, all year long. Yeah, on the NWT, it's hard to hide anything, your baits or anything like that, because you're co-anglers.
Yep.
And all of my co-anglers this year, black jigs, every single time, black jigs, black eye candy on the river. And I'll never forget my co-angler. He's probably watching this. He tells me every time I see him, and we're around people and he's talking, he goes, "That was the ugliest setup I've ever seen, black on black."
Well, didn't you hand it to him and he looked at you like, "Are you crazy?"
He did. And then we go catch. It was almost the biggest bag of fish on the river on day 2.
Yeah,
with that. So
incredible.
No, I that's the thing. It's just all natural colors. It goes back to bass fishing and what fish look at on a daily basis when they're out there swimming around.
So, plus, you're putting it right in their face, so you don't have to get out, crazy colors to try to.
You don't have to attract fish anymore because you know exactly where they are.
Yep. You're putting it right in their face.
Yep, and that's not my. So as far as curiosity now, so like if you're trying to attract fish to come search out a bait, those bright colors and stuff probably work. But good point. But now my curiosity. So when you're out there fishing and you catch a, 27-inch plus walleye, she's been in that lake for years and years and years and seen every single thing. So now what I believe is the way that I can intrigue them to bite is the curiosity of what's on the back of that jig. So with having plastics now that resemble the ones the bass guys have been using for a while, but geared towards walleyes. And especially now that I'm able to add whatever scent I want to these, that's what sparks that fish's curiosity, that giant female. Like I literally had a walleye as a 28-incher. Nate and I had a bet. Like, that's a 28-inch walleye. He goes, I don't know. I don't think so. You know, and we were going back and forth. And they were jigging leech, and it just nosed right down to it. Mm-hmm. And I sat down on the bow of the boat, just watching it, just nose down, right inches from it, watching it. Never ate it. And then ended up turning around throwing a eye candy minnow, the small one, down there. She went down, looked at it, and then swam away, and then did her little turn and came right back and just nailed it. I was like, so it's that curiosity, like you said with the colors, but they've seen everything up close except for these things now.
And most people would think it doesn't get more finessey, you know, for a negative fish, put a jig and a leech in front of their face. Yeah. That's, if they don't need a jig and leech, no way they're going to need a plastic. And you're kind of doing the opposite.
Yeah, and that's because they've seen the leech.
Yep.
They've seen them, and so I think there's a point where that curiosity is almost like what, you know, we also call a reaction bite in some cases, where they see it, they're confused, they're like, oh, I want to see what this tastes like. Or they can feel the smell of those oils coming off of that bait that we put on them, yep. And they're like, okay, I'm going to give this a try. But
I'm not sure who's told me this before, but something that I like to think is like fish don't have hands. Mm-hmm. So if there's something that they need to check out, they need to put it in their mouth.
Yeah. Yep. No, you're right. They got to pick it up somehow, and that's how they're going to do it. And one thing with that is, like, I've caught, like I was talking about the Ned rig earlier when I was bass fishing before and learned the walleye deal. When a bass or a walleye eats a plastic, it doesn't hold on to it like a bass does. Mm-hmm. A bass sometimes will hold it for a while, give you time, a little bit of time to set the hook. A walleye eats it, and it a lot of times immediately spits it. But that's also why, like, with the combination now of being able to use like a finesse plastic that we want to use, and that I'm not sponsored by any sort of scent company, but like adding your favorite scent to your plastics gets that walleye to hold on to it. Like, okay. I was a believer this year on Mille Lacs when we were pre-fishing for the AIM tournament, and I'm out on this 14-foot little reef, and there's a school of fish, like 8 fish or so, 8 walleye sitting there, and one big one in the middle. And it's hard to get that big one to bite when you got the smaller ones around mm-hmm. it. But I made a cast, and I had the eye candy minnow on there, and there was a boat coming on plane from my left to right. And so I didn't want to show my cadence. I didn't want to, do any of that. So I just let the boat go around. So it probably took 20, 30 seconds, right? They get out of sight going to my right. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to start. And I pan around, and the fish are still positioned there, suspended, a little bit off the rocks. And then so I reel up the slack, and I just start doing what I'm going to do. But I was like, wait a minute. There was a fish on. Yeah. So that big one had followed. I saw him go down a little bit, but just came right back up. It grabbed it on the way down, came back and suspended, and held it that whole entire time. So that, to me, then that's what I tell people. They're like, I can't catch them on plastics. Go catch one, and then after that, that's your confidence.
It's amazing what that does, because like when I first started fishing plastics, it was always on Mille Lacs, and it was like, oh, people be like, oh yeah, they eat plastics on Mille Lacs, and I kind of had that hit my head. And then you start using them on lakes around home, and they eat plastics anywhere, mm-hmm. and a lot of times, sometimes better than the live bait. Yep. So, curious about plastics. With the eye candy, which is great, for the listeners. Eye candy absorbs a lot of different oil and water-based scents. So like Tom said, you can add your favorite scent to it. It's really good. Make sure to test a little bit of your scent with it before you add it to the whole bag, because there are certain scents, especially like solvent-based scents that will basically dissolve it immediately. So test your scent. I played around a little bit with that at first, but not being a tournament guy and, ease of use, you grab a pack out of the office before you leave. I don't use a lot of scent. So when I'm fishing plastic with walleyes and they bite it, I'm almost setting the hook immediately. Do you still do that with the scent, or are you more the bass standpoint where they bite it,
give
you
it
let
to
them
them for a second.
take it? Okay.
Yeah, just to make sure that
Yeah.
that tail, and then now also like when they bite it, that first initial bite, I think, who knows where they grab it? They could be by the tail, but usually it's that second on those shorter baits.
So it seems like walleyes have that killer bite.
Yep.
You do that with live baits. Bite.
Yep.
Bite.
Yeah, and now with the no stretch lines, the super hard, the tungsten jigs, like on a slack line, I can feel a bite in 30 feet of water on slack line. Yeah. That's how, and so it's that kill shot that the walleyes have. So that first one, going back to a tournament, it was our second full season of doing aim. We had the championship on Lake Superior, and I was throwing. I had to figure out how to catch these suspended walleyes, and up until that point, a major tournament hadn't been won casting before on a Great Lake, and so the first few days of the tournament, I never caught a fish, or pre-fish, never caught a fish. Nate was trolling, so he was catching them here and there, but I finally resorted to a plastic worm, and it'd been sitting in scent probably for 2 years since bass fishing, and I only had like 3 or 4 left. And just to watch the first walleye that I casted at trail that thing all the way down to 30-some feet of water was amazing. Like I think it was curiosity, because they could see everything else I was throwing at them, live bait and everything, but they would not budge. They wouldn't move. And then that worm goes past them, and I think that scent trail, and it just followed all the way down to the bottom of the rocks, lost them in the rocks. I felt the bite, and I hadn't felt a bite in like 3 days, so I didn't know what to do anymore. I was actually on my phone too, so I dropped my phone and set the hook, and it dropped it, or it just pulled it out of its mouth because it's such a long worm. And then I let it go back down. The fish followed it back down, and then it's that kill shot. You wait, you feel the bite, but then you wait for that hard killing thump, and then it's when you set the hook. And that's what put us on that pattern there. It's just learning their reaction and stuff with forward-facing sonar.
It definitely takes a while to get some confidence in catching walleyes with soft plastics.
Yeah, for sure.
I was definitely the same way. Like, I'd use live bait, and then I'd try to put a plastic on, and I wouldn't give it enough time to actually let it work. I'd just immediately pick up the live bait again, because I know I'd catch fish on that because I've done it.
Yep.
But once you, like, last spring, everywhere we went, we brought eye candy, and we just crushed them everywhere. And I was like, how does this, like, I can use plastics now, and I bass fish a lot. We always got an eye candy paddle shad tied on, because if you see a suspended fish, throw that over their head, and we've caught so many walleyes last season. Well,
the key to that bait, the eye candy is, even without scent, it's exactly what it is. It's without scent. You don't open the bag and smell chemical. You don't smell plastic.
Yep.
So that, I think, is a big deterrent. And in a lot of baits, the first thing I did whenever I would open a pack of baits is smell it. And that plasticky smell, I think, how in the world would anything even want to keep that in their mouth? You know what I mean? And then the feel now. It's so soft. You can take a 3-inch bait and stretch it out to probably 18 inches. And so that realistic feel. And then also what you said, you have to go out there and you can catch them with live bait. So that's something I had to always still have to keep in my head too. Even when I go to a body of water where it's traditionally been won, or people do really well trolling, and I'm struggling for the first few days of practice and I'm starting to spin out, I'm thinking, okay, well, I know I can use live bait. I know I can troll to catch fish where people are trolling. But so why not just keep trying to get them to bite this, because the ones that are going to bite these plastics are going to be the right ones, and if it doesn't work, when I go to the tournament, live bait, trolling, whatever I have to do. And thank goodness it's not the third option yet.
So what percent of the time now do you think you're using plastics over live bait?
I'd say it is over half the time. Yeah. And I always have both in the boat, though, whether I'm just fishing for fun or because I want to see their reaction. And if
testing again, you're still learning.
Yeah, there's times two times this year. One time was with you guys that went out, and I didn't catch a single fish all day long. And it was with you guys, and then I went shortly after that with live bait, and I didn't catch a single fish. I could see fish all day long.
We were looking at fish all day.
All day. And they just, so if they're not going to bite live bait, they're not going to bite plastic, good luck. I mean, so yeah, I'm starting to lean more towards the plastic thing because, again, that curiosity. I'm not going to get, maybe, when I'm searching out those big fish, I can go to a school of fish and do pretty well, in 18 inch or smaller ones. But when I'm trying to single out that one or two giants, I know it's not likely that they're going to eat that live bait. But because they've seen everything, but if I can throw that plastic down, sometimes they'll swim away, but the other times they're just going to go down there and nail it because of just being curious.
So if a listener said, Tom, I have zero confidence in plastics, what is your go-to Northland setup for what would you use for jig and plastic, and then talk a little bit about the jigging cadence for somebody to learn and just go catch some fish. Maybe not those trophy fish, but just catch fish on plastics. Yeah,
first off, I go, if you're up in the Minnesota area, Mille Lacs is a great place to get your confidence. And full of fish, full of these good 18 to 21, 22 inchers. And my bait of choice, I mostly use a 1/8 ounce tungsten short shank on a 3-inch minnow. My second, probably I use just as much as the minnow is the grub.
Okay.
That little weird looking thing. I mean, it really, it does something to those fish on the Illinois River. My co-angler had the grubs on. He outfished me in the beginning. I had to switch over from the minnow to the grub. I think it's just that swirly tail.
It never stops. You can't get it to stop moving.
It won't stop.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the thing with
angel hair grub is kind of how I describe it. Because it just flows.
Yeah, and you look at that tail and you're like, that's going to break off in like one bite. You're not even going to catch a fish. And that thing is stretchy. Yep. And what I like about the minnow is the streamline. It's just streamlined. So when you pop it. So my preferred way to fish with a jig is, first I'll just give it subtle raises, not very high at all, just 6-inch, 7-inch raises, and then I'll drag it along the bottom a little bit. If he doesn't want to eat it, then I'll pop it, really short hops, really short pops, snaps, and to get a reaction. And usually that's when they're gonna pin it. But those bigger ones, they like it just to sit there. They don't want hardly any movement. And I think that's why the biggest comment I've had through these few years, people see me after the tournament, so I'm like, what are you doing out there? Because I'm barely moving my rod. And I think that's the key, though. It's just sitting there on the bottom, and that buoyant plastic is, raised up a little bit. Yeah. And just whatever current is in there, or whatever the waves moving my line, just that little bit of subtlety. And sometimes I'll sit there and wait 5 minutes for the fish to bite. As long as it's sitting there right there in front of his face, I don't care how long it takes. I'm gonna sit there if it's a big fish.
So
I don't have the patience for that yet.
what range distance from the boat is your So
40.
You got it 40.
Yeah.
So you got a big fish there. You put it at 40 and you just.
And I don't. So and the thing too, I could see it at 80.
Yeah.
But my brain's like cast, and I won't do it.
Yeah.
It has to be between 25 and 40, and I just for being accurate because I want that first cast to matter because the first cast matters the most. If it's off just a little bit, that fish either number one is you're gonna lose it depending on the wind and stuff like that, or it has to come at them from a certain angle, a certain direction, depending on which ways the fish is facing in the water. If the fish is facing toward the left, I want it to hit a certain way. If it's facing away from me, I want it to hit a certain way. And so that first cast has to be right on. And that's also why with my rod lengths and stuff like that, I use, a 6 foot, anything closest to 6 foot I can for accuracy. Like I could bomb cast some of these with some of these longer rods now, but I don't want to waste that cast. I want to make sure it's right on the first time.
And I was going to say, when I got to fish with you, that was like the first thing I noticed is you are a sniper. Like you see the fish and you cast it and you are always falling like right on the fish's head or around that. It was incredible how, I always thought I was pretty good at like ranges and whatnot, but you were on the fish's head like every time. It was pretty incredible. So
yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. So you talked about use a light setup, but I know like me, and especially when I learned how to use plastics, I would always step up a notch to entice that reaction bite. Really rip it hard and whatnot. So go up a weight. Do you play around with that at all, or
I
being
do.
that you can see them and see their reaction, you know how to get them to bite other ways?
Yeah. If I'll do that in deeper water or weeds.
Okay.
Weeds especially, I'll go heavier. I'll go up to even 3/8 in some of those weeds just to get that. And that's when I'm using the paddle shad. Mm-hmm. And there's something about that fall to get their reaction. Mm-hmm. I think that extra thump from the tail. And then when they go down, they probably lose it. But when that thing comes barreling out of there, they're going to grab it. Yeah. And but no. I know what you mean. Even on shallower waters or something or sand flats where I just it's 1/8,
just eighth
all the time because if they don't want it, like they'll want it one way or the other. You just have to figure it out. If I get to a spot where like that day when we went out again, didn't catch a single fish. I was super frustrated. That's why I had to go back out with live bait because I'm like, what's going on? And still couldn't catch them. So, but no, I like my light setups for the most part.
You hear that, guys? Sometimes Tom doesn't catch them.
2 days, okay? No.
So you talked about the 8th, but coming this spring, we'll have the 16th ounce tungsten. How are you utilizing that jig?
The same exact way, but the fall is obviously slower. But that's perfect, honestly. Like you watch a lot of the Bassmaster Elite Lives and stuff, and like even like with what Gussie's doing with hovering the baits and stuff like that, you get something light. You get something that let the current, even though you're in a small lake, you let the currents from the waves. From the boats, you let all of that a lot of times just do the work for you. That's magical sometimes. It's like so even using a big minnow, for example, like the red tails, the creek chubs. Like sometimes I've seen some rigs where they put 1/2 ounce or bigger weights on these chubs and drag them around. If it was me, I'd have an 1/8 or a 16th. Let that thing
go
just
wild.
swim.
So that 16th is more of how you want the bait to fall versus what depth of water you're in.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's times when, like on that Cass Lake tournament, we were finding fish in practice in like 35, 40 feet of water, and that was in September. And that was our first year of full, walleye fishing period in 2020. So we didn't understand the relationship between those Cisco's, I think they're in Cass Lake, whitefish, and walleyes and the pattern and stuff. We were just fishing. But when we went out there for the tournament, those fish moved. I'm like, well, they had to have gone shallower. Went up shallow, couldn't find them. And then I was like on the verge of spinning out, like, where did these fish go? And they were deeper. Our fish came between 55 and 68 feet of water.
Jeez.
And Nate reminds me all the time the deepest fish was 68 feet. He remembers that for some reason.
That's incredible.
This was on Cass.
And what time of year was this?
September, mid-September.
Okay, so
I remember people talking like, who won that tournament? Some bass guys. And they were like in like 60, 70 feet. I don't know what they were doing.
Say the mystery of Tom Huynh. When all the...
But yeah, that's on light. It was on light stuff. And, you know, sometimes what I think deters people from doing is the patience.
Yeah.
Like not getting bit, but for that bait to get down there.
Yeah. Yep.
But the more finesse on these big fish, the better. Lighter the line, lighter everything, the better for your chances of getting those things to bite. And that's what we're tournament fishing for, you know, but for those big ones.
So another thing, along with the black jigs, is walleye fishing out of the front of the boat. I think if you've told me this, when you guys started, hardly anyone was fishing out of the front, and now it's almost like everyone's out of the front of the boat. It's pretty incredible how even they're designing boats now that are more like bass boat decks and whatnot. What's your, because you got a pretty cool screen set up and all that. Talk a little bit about that on what you got on the front of your boat.
Yeah, on my Vexus I have the giant front decks now on these boats. It's awesome. But on the front, my setup this last year for 2023, I had a 16-inch flush mount. We had to cut the plate in the front to get that thing to squeeze down in there. And then I got a 17-inch 8600 series as well to put next to it for my just dedicated to live scope. And it's not like the 16 wasn't big enough, but and the 17 didn't come with any knobs or anything to be mounted to a bracket because they're meant for ocean vessels and dashes and stuff. So when we got that, I took the boat and everything over to Nate's over at Wolski RV down the road here, and he got some aluminum and stuff and made me a bracket. So I had a 17-inch screen, which, you know, you're seeing the same thing on a 10 as you are a 17, but, you know, I plan on doing this till at least 70. So my eyesight, you know, is just going to keep deteriorating. I want to make sure I'm seeing what I'm seeing. And the also it is a little overkill. You don't need that much, but I ran with two transducers, two live scope transducers on the trolling motor this year, one in down mode, one in forward mode. And on the 16, I could split screen mapping just to make sure I see where I was and I haven't gone over the same spot again with down. And that I used in certain circumstances where forward wasn't detecting the fish, and usually that's because of an aggressive contour, like a super steep drop, or if you got super aggressive boulders, like on Lake Vermilion, for example. That's a place I think when I think boulders, like big contour, but then giant rocks. So when you're forward, that is bouncing off and reflecting at a different angle downward, so you're not even seeing the fish. But when you're right over them, it's shooting right down, and you see that fish sitting right next to the rock. Now you have to be quick because when you're moving and you see that it's there, but at least you know it's there and you can drop something and hopefully get its attention. But that's the other thing, like I like to do, if I see one on down and I can't get to it quick enough, I'll let the boat go past it, turn around. I know a really good indication of where he's at, what rock he's sitting behind, and I'll throw a big, giant swim bait, like a 7-incher out there, not to catch the fish, just to get him to pull himself out, show his sneaky
himself.
self, and then I'll throw it back in with my finesse stuff to catch him. Yeah. But it's learning all that and those little extra, things. It's fun to try and to be like, oh, I'm going to get you to pop out and look at this bait, and I'm going to.
Do you ever use the perspective mode at all? I know I hear more and more bass guys talking about the perspective mode, and I think up here, like in the spring, I was like, oh, I bet that would work pretty good.
I know, I bet it would, but I haven't had the time.
Okay.
Yeah, to dial it in
at
all. I really, really want to, but again, when you've got forward so dialed in, it's hard to want to turn. But I could see, again, once that might be the next thing. You know what I mean? To keep us a step ahead. So we'll see.
Cool.
So you said last year you had 2 transducers, and you ran one in perspective and one down?
One down and one forward.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think, like, for me, it's been hard to learn perspective as much as down. But I think it'd be easier to learn the perspective mode with down next to it. Because then you're identifying it. You know what you're familiar with what it looks like on down.
Down
and then
or
you're
forward?
Forward.
Yeah. So if you use forward at the same time as perspective, I think so. To teach me that.
Do you
learn it?
Do you some guys talk about, finding the fish and shining off of them because they don't like that beam on them, or they think they don't like the beam on them because the fish get spooky and whatnot. Do you find that, or are you
Not yet.
keeping on fish all the time?
Yeah, I'm keeping on them all the time. Not to say they won't become spooky, just like bass down south with electronics in general. So they say, but I have seen fish react to the sonar. Not walleyes yet, but I've seen fish react to them.
Okay.
Whitefish.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting.
Do you chase fish around much? Like, if you know it's a good fish and he swims away, are you going to keep following it?
I'll chase him for a while.
Yeah.
Yep. I have to see one reaction.
Mm-hmm.
If I see one reaction to my bait, whether it's little or a lot or whatever, I just have to see one reaction first, and that's going to determine, okay, am I going to pursue this fish? Because a lot of times whenever I have to go chase something, it's going to be either into the wind, burning up battery, because I don't have a kicker, so burning up battery into the wind, or do I just keep continuing where I was and hopefully find another one? So I'll chase one down until I can see how that fish reacts in my first initial cast.
Yeah. So you say you do a ton of observation on it. What, is there anything kind of wild in nature that you've got to learn from looking at those fish on live scope? Like, do they react different when other species are around? Will muskie push fish out? Is there anything wild like that you've noticed looking at all these fish?
Well, nothing too wild, but I guess I'm surprised that walleyes, like usually the biggest in the system, especially if you're in a river system. It doesn't mean you have to be in the actual current itself, but like a backwater or like a Lake Winnebago, for example. It's a river system, opens up into a few lakes. You got a lot of trash fish. You got a lot of carp, white bass, drum, catfish, all that stuff. So what I was surprised with there is, we learn that walleyes are schooling fish, and they not a chance. Whenever I would find one walleye, and usually it would be around, I don't know if I should say it, but they're around catfish.
Okay.
And
is that just the big ones or just the walleyes in general?
In general, I don't know, because I was around good fish that day, that trip.
Okay.
Yeah, so I came in second that tournament, but so I was around quality fish, but I just barely, tournament was almost over before I caught the last one. So I wasn't catching a ton, but they
Okay.
were the right ones, and they were always around catfish. So I learned this year did me a lot of good because I fished Lake Koshkonong in Wisconsin, which is 4 feet maximum depth, and talking about
Is that a river system then?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There's a Rock River, I think, runs into that.
Okay.
And I could be wrong, but I think that's the river that dumps
Okay.
into that. It's a big lake, but
It's
only
just
4 feet
4
deep.
feet.
And Nate and I are the only ones casting, and that tournament everybody was trolling.
Say, how do you dissect a lake like
Oh
that?
my goodness! There's no structure in it either, so we had to like go around and I just told myself, like, again, I'm going to cast at every one of these marks, and a lot of them were sheep's head. But then first I started getting my eyeballs about me and my brain trained. I'm like, I just quit casting at all those marks. And then just like on the NWT deal in Winnebago, I had a camera guy on day 2 and going around, and he was looking at the screen with his camera, and he was like, gosh, this would be awesome for Garmin to be, watching this. And he's like, all these fish, how do you know? And I'm like, just from being out here this week. And then I tell him, like, there's one.
Yep.
And I cast at it and caught it. And it was just, you have to see it. You know what I mean? It's hard to explain what that looks like, though.
Yeah. So I know. Generally, you can kind of tell what's what, but it sounds like what you're describing. You think it changes a little bit day to day, or lake to lake, on what you're seeing. Is it just how like the fish set up, or is it just kind of getting that confidence that, yep, that's for sure?
Yeah. So you're saying like from lake to lake,
Yeah,
the fish look different.
like-
a walleye look different on
Yeah,
Leech
yeah.
than it does in Winnebago.
Yeah.
It does.
Okay.
Yep. And
Is it because how they set up, or
I think it's due. Now I have to get with Garmin on this to verify, but I could almost put money on it that it's because of it depends on the bottom makeup of the system
and how
the return.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing I can put into it. I've spent many hours in these few years looking at this, and I'm like, going from even Great Lake to Great Lake, it's like they look different. And so I have to catch one to make sure. That's why on Superior, for example, I started doubting that these were walleyes anymore that I'm looking at, but then people were trolling, catching walleyes, and the water temp was almost too cold to be anything else, like a drum coming out of the river or something. Mm-hmm. So they look different from lake to lake in certain ways. They, like on Leech, they look a certain way. Mille Lacs, pretty much similar to Leech, but once you get into these lakes with muddier bottoms, like Lake the Woods, they look way different.
Interesting.
Yeah, and too and I've had the opportunity. I've been fortunate enough to be in boats with different brands of electronics than mine, and there is a big difference with that too. So, like, just do your research, and before a person spends the money on it, and look and see like which one is just going to benefit you the most, and which one do you actually. To me, the one that you can just turn on and go fishing is the best one.
Yeah.
And not mess with settings too much at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, good, Tom. I really appreciate you coming on today. I say it's always, I've been on a few other podcasts with you, and I know kind of your story, but I feel like I always learn a little bit more and more about Tom every time we talk, so it's exciting to hear. For all the listeners, we're going to take Tom to the back, and he's going to stock up on black jigs. So black jigs may or may not be in stock by the end of this, but I think we got a healthy supply back there, so make sure to check out those black tungsten jigs. We also have some cabin kit boxes that are great gift ideas, so make sure to check out our website during this Christmas season. And, yeah, awesome show. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
Northland, fish and tackle, fisherman's favorite. It's a fisherman's favorite.